we're really pleased and honored to have Marta Tellado as our luncheon keynote. Marta is a member of the Yale Corporation. She's also the president and CEO of Consumer Reports. I think everyone here has read a Consumer Reports at least once in their lives. But what Marta has done is she has transformed Consumer Reports from an analog to a digital corporation, okay? And we're going to hear about that. Before that, she was raised in New Jersey. She was the senior advisor for U.S. Senator Bill Bradley. Oh, by the way, Marta, you know, we do have a Bruce Springsteen poster out there that silent auction you can bid on. I don't know if you're a Springsteen fan. Right before taking over at Consumer Reports, she was the VP of Communications, Global Communications for the Ford Foundation. But also important, not maybe more importantly, but very important now, is one of her roles on the Yale Corporation is she is a key member of the Presidential Search Committee looking for a successor for Peter Salovey. And I'm sure Marta will be happy to answer questions on that. She's going to speak for about 20 minutes. We're going to open it up for Q&A. I know there are going to be a lot of questions. Let's give a big hand for Marta Tellado.
Well, I'm just glad that you're eating, because it's always really rough when I'm the thing that's standing between you and lunch. So thank you for that. I'm going to just pop that over. It's wonderful to be here, and it's especially wonderful because I understand this is the first meeting you've had since COVID, and you've had some Zoom meetings, and we've all experienced those, and they're good, but there's a little bit of Zoom fatigue. So I think all of us are happy to be together and to be in the same room together, and I appreciate being part of the program for your first in-person meeting. I also want to thank Rachel and Ken and Merle. And Ken, thank you for extending yourself, and that was a wonderful surprise to be asked to come, and so I'm really honored by that, and honored to be here. I'm also especially happy that it gives me a chance to publicly thank Peter Salovey, who I've had the pleasure of working with in the last several years when I went from the President's Council to the board. And that's been a really wonderful way for me to give back to an organization and a university that changed my life completely. And I know for many of us, Yale is more than just a place where we went to school. It was part of our lives, what we called home for so long. And I know how much we value the leadership and integrity of this institution. I knew I liked Peter the first day I met him, because how could I not? He married a woman named Marta. So I just figured, you know, there's got to be something I like about this guy, and there was a lot that I did like. I'm incredibly honored to be a member of the corporation, and I accepted with great humility when they also asked me to be on the search committee. So I know that's what everybody's really curious about. But hang in there with me. I want to tell you a little bit about a couple of other things, and then we'll move on from there. Because when I got this invitation, it got me thinking. It got me thinking about my path to Yale, and the path that I took since then. That has really been, I think, in sync with some of the paths that we've all chosen in the nonprofit space, in the social sector. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my story and how the pieces add up, because I wasn't the kid. I can't remember a day in my childhood where I stood up in bed and said, I want to be the president of Consumer Reports. Thank you. All right, I got 2 mics here just in case this one's not enough. So what was my path? It wasn't a typical path, right? I was born in Havana, Cuba, as were my 3 older brothers and my parents. And they were kind of working their way up from, you know, my mom went up to the 6th grade. My dad, first generation immigrant parents that left a very impoverished section of Spain to work as domestics for more wealthy Cuban families. And lo and behold, something happens in your country and you're just uprooted and you have to pack up and move. And that's what we did. They wanted us to be in a place where we could exercise our freedoms, where we could pursue opportunities, and be a part of a democracy. And it was an idea, and just based on that idea, they left everything. They packed a few belongings in a suitcase, and we landed in Newark, New Jersey, which is just over the river. So, I was trying to become just a normal American kid. The problem was that it was not a very normal time. It was anything but normal. When you think about what was happening in the country at that time, parents that are fleeing a revolution are going to the U.S. and expecting a lot of stability and reassurance about where they go. But what ended up bookending my childhood was the assassination of one president, the resignation of another, the murders of RFK and MLK, and my own hometown was up in flames, giving a lot of the racial issues that we were dealing with in my neighborhood as the only Latino family in an essentially African-American neighborhood. So I had a front row seat to what was happening in the country, and undoubtedly, my parents' journey and that really influenced some of the choices I make. I mean, one wants to take credit for no, I've always been, mission-oriented. I think what surrounds us and what makes an impression on us really drives some of the choices. And, but there was something else also happening alongside these incredible events that were shocking, really. There were new voices that were lifting up our heads about some of the issues that were happening. I think about Silent Spring and Rachel Carson and seeding a movement and a consciousness about what we are willing to tolerate in our environment, in our food, in our water, and speaking up about that. I think about Ralph Nader and Unsafe at Any Speed, also published in that same time, questioning the safety of products and fighting for things that were really not embedded in any kind of law or protection for us. And then I have to think about what's happening in Washington during that time. It's the Civil Rights Act, it's the Voting Rights Act, it's the Equal Pay Act, and it's standing up whole new agencies like the EPA, which in my lifetime, that's pretty shocking to just sort of recognize that all this stuff was happening simultaneously. And I think it was a time, no question, of extraordinary change and challenge, but I also saw it as a time for opportunity because there were new voices. And I wanted to be a part of that change and contribute in some way. And I also wanted to understand these incredible societal forces that forced my family to leave. And I wanted to understand the societal forces that were swirling around me. And as a first-generation American, education was really the bridge to opportunity for me. There really wasn't another option. We put a lot of pressures on ourselves because we know that's the thing I have to accomplish if I want my world to open up and if I want a place in that world. So somehow I did find my way to Yale. And my dream at that time was I'm going to go to Yale and I'm going to become an expert in what's happening in the world. I want some deep knowledge. I'm going to be a political science professor, and that is what my degree is in. I had every intention to being part of the academy. And I certainly never, as I said, never imagined I'd wake up and be the CEO of Consumer Reports and also publish a book last year that's essentially a handbook on consumer power called Buyer Aware. But that mission-driven life that I chose was my way of refusing to divide my passions. And my passions were really the world of ideas and the world of action. And I think a lot of people in this room probably struggled with that too. As an undergraduate, you're forced, you must study this, you gotta follow this lane. And I was always struck by, I'm torn. I wanna have that knowledge base, I'm thirsty for that, but I also wanna have an impact. I wanna be on the front lines, I wanna understand what's happening and apply that knowledge in a very different way. And that's how I discovered the social sector, right? It's not a straight line. Somebody comes in your path and sort of opens that door for you. And I think everybody who's in this room is living proof that we can make a difference. There's no singular paths. The social sector is forever changing and growing and reinventing itself in order to do that. And so it felt like the right place for me to be a part of this group and your group at YANA. And I think at every step in my career, and you did a great job of remembering all that just off the top. That was Ken. I struggle with it myself as I get older. But at every stop in my career, whether it was working for my home state senator, Bill Bradley, and yes, I did play basketball, which is what I get that question a lot. That's okay. I'm very conscious of my height, and I'm proud of it. But I am the shortest person in my family, just to give you a sense of what that. So, and I didn't realize how tall I was until I got to kindergarten. And then I realized, why are these kids so small? Putting that aside, Bill Bradley, working for the Ford Foundation, the largest global philanthropy. There are many larger, but none that have so many offices spread out around the world, hiking in the mountains of Andes with Peruvian women who are doing microfinance, working on reproductive rights in East and West Africa. It really opened my mind and my eyes to so many things that I wasn't seeing by just being in the halls of Congress. And don't get me wrong, those are hallowed halls. And when I think about what's happening to it now, it's a place I don't recognize because we're actually getting things done. And we were getting things done across the aisle. And so that's a very painful sort of place for me to think about right now, given how much I feel like I was able to accomplish when I was there and when people were actually getting results and working. So at every step in each of those places, what I was really trying to do was to pair a strong mission. What I learned was that you have to pair that mission-driven sensibility also with a very entrepreneurial spirit. And I don't think folks who are not in our social sector give us enough credit for that entrepreneurship that has to come with solving big, thorny social issues and social problems. I mean, an enormous amount of entrepreneurial spirit. So I think one of the things we have, and is probably represented in this room, is we do live in a country with an incredibly robust social sector, nonprofit sector. And what I've learned is that it takes it takes as much creativity and entrepreneurial drive to be in this sector than it does in the Silicon Valley. People love to talk about creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship, and I rarely hear them talking about all of us and the work we do in that same breath. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what I had to do, because it was all about that, and that's what really drew me to working at Consumer Reports. And of course, there are a lot of roadblocks to the things we do. There's, as we already talked about, government gridlock. There's also the fact that some of us probably are overly dependent on donors in the nonprofit space, and sometimes their proclivities, ebb and flow, and you really feel at the mercy of that model. So let me tell you about why I jumped into this particular model at Consumer Reports. All of you know we're a nonprofit. We've been around for about 87 years. We have 60 labs that test products. I have about 600 employees. I'm very proud that our auto test center that tests 2,000 cars a year is based in rural Connecticut. And I have a research and survey team that keeps their pulse on what it is consumers are struggling with by actually talking to them, engaging them in a way that allows us to generalize and be fact-driven and science-based. And I also have investigative teams who break stories about things that no one's talking about. And we don't fight until those things are addressed and taken off the market. So to me, what a lot of people don't know about us, though, is that we're a social enterprise in every sense of the word. 90% of the revenue that we have is generated by the people that we serve, right? I'm not dependent on philanthropy, and we still don't take and never will take advertising. People think we're a magazine and that we have ads, and we're probably owned by Meredith or Condé Nast, none of those things. So I've got to do all that, and I've got to generate products and services that compete with some pretty big, fierce companies on the market already. So how does that happen? We have a double bottom line. Everything I produce and sell and make available in a membership program, I've got to pour back into the organization so that we can innovate, grow, and invest in what we need to be able to compete against a lot of, dare I say, not so trustworthy content on the internet. So how does that happen? How do you even begin to do that? I think for our model to be sustainable is that, going into an organization that's 87 years old and not a once that I go to a place and someone says to me, my dad loved that magazine, I love that magazine, we trust that magazine. But, I sit down with my nieces and nephews and they don't say that. And that's because trust is not evergreen, right? You have to continually earn that trust. And in legacy organizations, and there are many remarkable social sector legacy organizations, and I'm sharing this because there was a lesson for me, we get complacent. We rest on our laurels. We have been, as many of you said before I walked in this room, the go-to place. But it's a completely different marketplace now, and folks are turning to other vehicles that are good enough and that they think are free, but in fact, they're advertising. And so then you think about what I have to compete with. I have to compete with influencers, those people on the internet that are charming. They're good at what they do. They're very convincing. I'm probably hooked to one or two of them, just like, things to do around the house. And then there's, the YouTubers, the platforms, the free review sites where you'd have to read between the print to understand that that's not really a review, it's advertising. And they're really good at masking what that is. And then you have to think about Google and Amazon and think about them as advertising platforms. Where I show up there on the searches when you're looking for something depends on how much I can pay to be higher up on the results. The results that you get are being paid for by that result. So that's what my competition is. It's a gateway for us to reach the audiences that we need to reach. And then on top of that, you think about ChatGPT. How many people have been on any generative AI, large language models? Yep. They're kind of fun. You ask them a lot of questions. Remember, they scrape the internet, and they're based on algorithms. What they're really, really good at is impersonating facts. You really can't verify them because they're scraping the internet, but they're amazing tools. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're trying to create responsible AI to compete with perhaps AI that might not be as trustworthy for you. But that's what I have to do to stay relevant in this organization. That's the job. And I think as smart as some of the people I hire and as inventive that they are, the people who are going to decide whether Consumer Reports succeeds or not are not my engineers and my software engineers. It's the actual people. It's consumers who see it and are drawn to it and stumble into us in the course of their everyday lives, whether that is on social media, whether it's searching in Google, but they're not walking into a store or subscribing to a magazine. Though I still have a very robust magazine business, and many of you probably enjoy that, but the growth that we've been investing in is really in digital tools. So we've had a long, productive legacy in getting toxic chemicals out of food. We haven't stopped that. Just this week, we came out with a report on chocolate. What you don't know about chocolate is that it has lead and cadmium in it, and that comes from the actual soil that the cocoa beans are sourced in. There are really no regulations about the limit. This is the second time around the block that we've tested it, and we're trying to nudge Hershey, who's one of the more bigger violators, and we'll keep at it until we get what we need. But that stuff we continue and still do. And in addition to being able to take credit for making seatbelts standard in every car, we're now fighting for all the technology that saves your life. In the past, it was seatbelts, but all the forward collision warning, the blind spot warning, the pedestrian warning, in many automobile manufacturers, those are luxury items. So if you want a safe ride and you want to protect your family, it's a luxury. It's not standard. So we don't have a mandate for that. And we're not able to move Congress or legislators at the speed of which we need things. But when you have a community as large as we do, with 5 to 6 million members, that's power. And so what we told legislators and what we told car manufacturers are, if you want to be in the top 10 in our ratings, you need to make all that safety technology standard. Well, guess what happened? The market started moving in that direction, right? The market is made up of supply and demand. How do you use your demand to create the kind of power you need to make the change that you want to see in the world? And then finally, everybody still assumes that the products you buy, the services you sign up for have all been tested and verified. They haven't. And so we have to continue to work on the standard setting. And what we know is that the recall system is broken. How do you recall products in a secondary market when you can just go and search for something on Google and find that crib that should not be on the market, but it's being sold to you for half the price? And by the way, it's also down the block at the nursery school and at the daycare center. So that's not working. But in a rapidly changing landscape, for us, how do you one of my ambitions was this job is really going to test me, and it really did, pun intended. Almost 10 years into this job, though, and I can tell you it's been incredible to be at the forefront of, as you said, Ken, going from analog to digital, maintaining an analog business because we're still in the middle of this transition and this revolution, keeping those loyal analog customers, and then putting all of my weight and power and business acumen and innovation teams into what's new. So I have to keep one and grow the other simultaneously. I got everything I thought I was going to get. Every part of my brain is being put to work on this endeavor. And so the reinvention mission at CR, for me, started with technology. People are like, wow, technology, you're a product tester. And I was like, well, no. I actually realized that we didn't have the technology stack, the basic fundamentals of what we would need to compete, and how we could build that and be able to compete for something we don't even know is coming down the line. So, for example, who could have predicted COVID? By the time COVID came around, we actually had the technology where I just had to tell my staff, flip the switch, we're working from home. I don't know if you know this, but our headquarters, where we have most of our labs, was just a block away from test case number 1. The gentleman, the attorney, whose office is just a couple of blocks from here, who was the first case of COVID in the city of New York. So we were probably one of the first organizations that shut down weeks before everyone else did in February. Most shut down in March. But so working on technology, having that ability to think about how do we apply an entrepreneurial spirit to a complacent legacy organization which has been at the top of the heap for a very long time. And so today, if you're not thinking about some of those issues, you're not really prepared for whatever is coming next, because what we know is that change is really the only constant, and I'm always looking for the talent and the technology and the creativity to see things that may not be in front of us yet. So what we do now, I'll give you a couple of examples of where, of course, we're rating and reviewing, and I've talked a little bit about what we're doing there. But now, yes, we're still rating cars, but we're also helping consumers figure out how to install home charging stations for their EV. And also, how can they give someone like Consumer Reports, who's not going to share their data, but give me your data and help us understand which charging stations in your neighborhood are not working well or not well lit? How do we crowdsource and map that effectiveness of charging stations so that we can create a community that's not only driving off the lot with a brand new EV, but is actually going to be able to charge it in a way that's safe, convenient, and accessible to every neighborhood in every community. The other thing we're doing is think about all the apps on your phone. And okay, so everybody's assuming those apps are safe. Some of us are more savvy than others. Most of those apps, you have to really steward them because they're there to just swallow up your personal information and to sell that information to others. I'll give you a case in point, GoodRx. What a fabulous idea GoodRx is. It's an app to help you find the lowest priced pharmaceutical drugs on the market in your neighborhood. And it will pinpoint and tell you, don't go to CVS, go here, half the price. Well, what we learned and what we found out was that they were sharing your medical data and your prescriptions widely. You're the product. When something like that is that good and it doesn't cost you anything, somebody else is making money off of what you're sharing. We went public with that story, and thank goodness they've stopped doing it. It was that easy. It's not that they can't create an app that will protect your privacy, but it's violating HIPAA rights. But guess what? That doesn't apply in the digital market because there are no standards, no consumer protections or standards. All the things we're so proud of at Consumer Reports for securing and documenting, they don't translate into a digital world. And so we've also got to work on the front lines of what are the standards, the privacy standards. We're doing the same thing on all those banking apps. You see those Zelle, Cash App, Venmo. Some of them are partnered with your bank, and you think that the security and the protections that are afforded to you by your bank are also afforded to you by Zelle, Cash App. Not the case. Those are partners. Those aren't part of Bank of America or Citibank. And so if you make a mistake and you send somebody $500 by accident, you're not going to get that back. All right? So we're working with those apps to try to reverse engineer them because they can be more safe and more secure. So that calls on us to be more upstream. And in the past, you could just wait for those products to come on the market and ding them and name and shame these companies. Well, given the product cycles today, you have to get further upstream. You want a consumer advocate at the table informing the shape of those apps, informing the technology, informing the privacy rules and rights that you have as a consumer. So to encourage that to happen, we also came out with an app last month. It's free. It's called Permission Slip. You can get it on the App Store. And you know, the market spends so much time on these dating apps where you're just flipping and finding people. We thought, why is it not easy to get an app and flip and find all the companies that are tracking you and then have someone like Consumer Reports act as your agent to tell them to stop? That's what the app does. You just get on that app. It's real simple. We've got about 100 companies. We were off the charts the first week we left it. We got a wonderful piece in the Washington Post saying, get this app. It crashed in the first 24 hours. That's how many people came to it. That's a good problem to have. I'm okay with that. We just re-engineer it and fix it. But, you know, that's the kind of change that we've been working on. And so what it means is that the relationship we have in the social sector with the people we're trying to serve is not a one-way transactional relationship. It's a community. It's a two-way relationship. I keep telling my staff we have to be more consumer-centric. Just because we've done the things we've done for so long the way we've done them, we have to be in community with people in their communities. And so what does that look like? Think about the water that comes out of your tap, and think about why you respect Consumer Reports. Well, we've got testers, we've got engineers and lab coats, and they're experts. Well, what we did was we distributed water testing kits to 150 communities around the country, and we said, test your tap water, give us the results. They did. And of course, the results were shocking. You know, PFAS chemicals that linger in your water and in your products and that we know are harmful. But that's a very different way of engaging communities, and it's not just the expert telling you, it's getting people engaged to demand what is rightly should be an expectation for all of us, that the tap water that comes out of your kitchen is safe, that you can use it, you can cook with it, you can serve it to your kids and feel like it's okay. Well, it's not the case. So we do about that. We start to work on the standards setting that need to happen in order for that to happen. It also provides us with the insights we need to create the products that really suits their needs. So it's that virtuous cycle, I think, that we're really trying to stand up. And I guess I'll just close by saying that, the people that we're all serving in our communities as social sector entrepreneurs, they're going through countless hurdles right now. And you think of inflation and the belt tightening going on in every community. I've got my finger on the pulse of consumers. I know when they're holding back and why, and what kind of impact that has on the economy. We also know that there's an enormous amount of conflict around the world, undermining our economy and so many other things. There's disinformation running rampant. That's just, I could spend a whole day just talking about that and how we have to defend ourselves in that world. And then, of course, the breakneck speed of AI and the fact that I was pleased to see the president hold a conference, a closed-door meeting with AI entrepreneurs, but there wasn't a single consumer advocate at the table. I don't see innovations coming from those companies unless we demand them and unless we say, no, actually, you need to build for, it needs to be privacy by design, not because I'm chasing you down and humiliating you about the data that you're stealing, like embedded into the product. Think about a business model that works for consumers, not just for your bottom line. There's got to be a different way to do this. I firmly believe, and it's why I've devoted my entire life to it, is the nonprofit sector has to be a pillar to uphold the societal values that we all care about. And much like Yale, we're at a time right now where it has to be about knowledge and truth. So I see a real symmetry about what's needed in the world today and what we're trying to uphold. And that could mean many things for many of us. It could mean expanding the universe of B Corps as we think about how to expand social entrepreneurship. It could be furthering the recent trend of investing in environmental and socially conscious investment funds. You're seeing movements in that direction. It could also mean diversifying the leaders in our sector to better connect with the people we're trying to serve. When I got to Consumer Reports and just flipped through the magazine and I said, well, wait a minute, the consumer market has changed dramatically. And we have to think of what that's made up of, and we have to be really smart about the segments of our communities and what they're struggling with, and we need to serve that. It's not a one-size-fits-all anymore. And we also have to really be honest with ourselves about what it's going to take to revitalize our social sector. Funders are very reticent to donate money to go under the hood to fix your technology, to advance you into the next phase. They want to fund programs. Tell me, make those tears roll about the people that you're serving. But how do you do that when you don't have the infrastructure? And you have to knock on doors. I mean, for me, I don't have a whole lot of profit margin, so I had to knock on doors of philanthropies because I can't go to a venture capital. So I say, take a chance on me. I want to build an app. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that's where I went to be able to get the dollars that I needed to demonstrate that it can be done. But we won't be able to compete in this sector if we don't really be honest with ourselves about what's needed in our organizations in order to do that. Why are we stitching things together when everybody else is zooming right past us? That's something I feel very strongly about, and coming from philanthropy, I use every opportunity I can in front of a philanthropist or an institutional philanthropy to say, we need general operating funds. We need you to recognize that we too have to be on the internet in ways. We too have to think about AI. So thank you. And I do want to do a little commercial. I am going to be previewing our own version of a chat GPT that is going to be pulling data from our trusted resource so that you have a very conversational relationship with our information, and that you know it's not pretending to know the facts, it is the facts. So I hope I can count on you to jump in the moment. I think it'll probably happen at least in beta before the end of the year, and I'm really excited about that. And all that to just say is that we have to be the dynamic force the world wants us to be. That's what we have to do. We've got to take that passion that we have, marry it with the entrepreneurship that is needed for this moment in time, where, you know, I remember the way I characterized what it felt like to arrive here. You know, a world of unrest, uncertainty, division, volatility. Sound familiar? I think we can say that about the world we're living in right now. And I always go back to when I took this job, I did a lot of research. I got that from my Yale degree. And I dug in and I found a quote from one of the founders of Consumer Reports, this really geeky engineer guy, Colston Warren, who even has that name these days. It was fabulous, you know. And he said, but here's what he said. He said, free choice depends on a fair exchange of knowledge, right? Free choice depends on a fair exchange of knowledge. All of us here as Yale alums understand the power of knowledge. That we're very proud, and we're very proud to make sure that our institution continues to reinforce and understand the power of knowledge. And we're all in service to channeling that knowledge to make the world a better place. So both the knowledge and the spirit of entrepreneurship, I think, does have the potential, and I've tried to employ it whenever I can to make change happen. And I guess I would just close by saying that the world is really calling us at this moment. It's demanding from us that we bring out that knowledge and we marry it with purpose to make positive change in the world. The work that we do in the social sector isn't easy, but it is the work that you're doing is more important than ever. So thank you for being a part of the social sector community and for this very generous invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. My name is Carlos Barasueta. Good to see you again. I have a question about the leadership in higher ed. We actually talked about this in this table. It's a 12th century institution. There's issues with change. So I'm thinking about innovation, AI, crisis management, policy making. There are all these things that a university president needs.
Yeah.
But it's the pipeline and the skill set, the one that is being used. Many of them come from faculty ranks. So on the skill set level, you know, the president has to be an expert manager, compliance, and do they have the experience required? You know, I was a former ombudsman dean, all of that, so I watched this many times. You know, is the pipeline and the skill set aligned with what the universities are searching, and then connected to that, the diversity question when it comes to searches like this?
So yeah, a university president is expected today to have superpowers. That is what it is. I mean, it is. I thought, you know, my job was tough. It is nothing compared. There's and I think what you're saying is that those expectations are dovetailing with a higher education model that's also under stress. And so when you think about coming into a university and leading a university, you are also part of this larger issue around higher education. Where's the thought leadership around the crisis of higher education? So you have to be at that larger perspective, and then you're right, you have to manage a university. So that's all very familiar. You can imagine that, you know, as part of the search committee, right now we're in the intake phase. I have spent a lot of time, all of us have on the search committee, meeting in groups with faculty. We have the student advisory committee. We have an alumni. I've already had that, and we'll have more. And I have been meeting, each of us have a list that we're all getting through one-on-one meetings. We're also meeting with staff. And I think the important thing for us is not to rush into something without really listening. We've got to do two things. We've got to listen, and then we've got to really wrestle with a recommendation that we would give to the larger board. So I think it's three things, right? It's what are those issues in higher education that are really of the moment? What are the attributes? You know, you're not going to check every box, right? What are those superpower attributes that are relevant? And lastly, what we've been asking folks is, and given that there's so many challenges facing the world, if you had to prioritize the one that you felt Yale should not overlook, which would it be? And so each of the conversations, we've tried to structure it that way. And I would say that if you haven't done so already, there is a site to go to where we ask and solicit those kinds of responses. And you have to know we look at all of it. And not only are we taking this in, but the next president, whoever they will be, is going to get this information as well. Because the intake is highly valuable. And they should see that, and they should know that. I see one there, and the gentleman in front of you.
Okay, this was a wonderful talk. You touched on so many different topics there.
Yeah.
And I want to start with your personal story at the beginning and finish with your final statement at the end and ask you a question. So when I arrived at Yale, I came from a third world developing country as an immigrant family, immigrated to the US and read a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I came to the US, to Yale in particular, because I wanted to be in my second chapter, learn from peers and colleagues and masters. And I learned a lot. And every time I come back to the Yale community, I learn even more. And it's wonderful. Now, I'm just wondering about Yale in the bigger picture. And I'm thinking about the bigger picture in my own life, about chapter 3, the chapter 3 of giving back to the community. So the vision for Yale is to be a wonderful research organization and a wonderful educational institution. But that's sort of rather limited. What are we doing for the world? What are we doing to give back to everybody who's given us this wonderful education? So on your search, and a question to you, because you have such a wonderful vision and because you believe in quality in consumer products and all of that. What can we do to give back to the world as Yale? And what can the next president do for us and the world?
Well, that is the question before us. And in great humility, I would say that those are the deliberations and the serious questions that we have to ask ourselves. And what a great privilege it is to be a part of the Yale community and to be able to do it from that vantage point. I sat on the board of a much smaller undergraduate college that I participated in, and I can tell you the conversations on those boards are very different. It's about surviving. So Yale is not about surviving. It's about leading. That is the responsibility. And that's why this moment is so important and why it's so humbling to be a part of that. And why it's so important to not walk into that with a myopic vision, but to really try to understand the community, the moment, the needs, and recognize that whatever person we choose, they're going to be human, right? They're not going to be superheroes. But I think we can't also forget, I should add that one of the things I always like to end my conversations with people on as I do these interviews and listening sessions is after they've told me, what they think the big issues are, what the leadership is, what the attributes are, and which of the 10 issues that are happening in the world should we be focused on. I say, well, tell me why a person who suddenly we decide is that person should come. What would you tell them that is so amazing about this institution? And those answers are remarkable, and many of them kind of jump off from the same thinking of yours, is what is our responsibility as Yale, as a leader to the world? To those of much is given, you have to also return that. So I think that's why it is so important for us. Because one person here said they have to manage complexity. Yes, that's one part of it. But one of the things that's so remarkable and so unique about us is our focus on the humanities, but also recognizing, in combination with science and engineering and technology and discovery, and how those two things come together, the incredible collections that we have. I mean, who can speak to those? And the artistic and creative force that we also have in music and drama. That's a remarkable, remarkable set of resources. And so recognizing them for what they are and taking them into the future in a way that will create that leadership is an awesome responsibility. I see another hand back there.
So from the world of emergency.
Oh, yes, sorry, I will get to you. I remember you had your hand up. Go ahead. Yes, thank you. I want to take him in turn. He was so patient.
Oh, thank you. I'll continue the string of immigrants, but I want to get back to, and thank you for being with us. This is great. Back to the issue of, back to consumer reports. And kind of in addition to the transition from analog to digital, there's a generational transition obviously there where it might be blurring the distinction between consumer and citizen, because we in the social sector tend to laud kind of the growth of socially conscious purchasing, but socially conscious purchasing can also become partisan and polarizing. So how are you dealing with that issue of people, making socially or political statements through their purchasing, and how does that figure into the future consumer? Well,
I like to think of us as consumerists, right? We're knowledgeable. We're a very mainstream brand, but the reason people turn to us is because they do share some characteristics and traits. We know a thing or two about folks that love consumer reports. They are very science-driven. They want fact. They're very discerning. It's just the facts. Don't cloud me with things I might not agree with. But what they need to understand is whatever we say, it's from a place of independence. So if I'm going to now give you some green choices, as opposed to just this refrigerator is going to keep that precious food of yours in tip-top shape, and not only that, but it's reliable over a span of 15 years. But there are many people out there that are also wondering what's the life cycle of that fridge, from manufacturing to disposal. Can you tell me something about this that differentiates it from another purchase? And not just efficiency, but that's a sustainability journey. If we know the state of our planet, that's a fact, right? We know that it is costing us an enormous amount and the garbage is piling up everywhere. Can you make choices that are consistent? I'm not going to force you to do that. I'm also always going to tell you, and I'll give you an example. So I know I'm going to share a name that you're probably all very familiar with, and that is Senator Cruz from He came knocking at my door because we evaluated gas stoves. And in our evaluation, we said, there are ways for you to protect yourself for gas stoves. This is what we found, this amount of emissions. Here's our recommendation. You need a hood. You need to think about opening your windows. You need to think about the ventilation in your house. We never said, don't buy it. So I got this very threatening letter that said, you know, I'm part of a mass conspiracy to basically, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, actually. That's kind of what he said. And I had to spend a lot of time kind of unraveling that and saying, wait a minute, no, I don't think you understand. Like, here's what we do, here's how we do it. We're not on record anywhere saying, but you see, and so to me, I always go back to that place of science, knowledge. We're going to be transparent with our methodology. We're going to walk you through what we're doing. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm giving you the facts so you can make a choice about what you want to do. Now, I will tell you not to buy something if I see that 100 infants have died in an inclined sleeper and the Consumer Product Safety Commission refuses to take it off the market. You know, when the markets fail and when our government fails, that's what differentiates us from Wirecutter. They're not interested in that fight. We want to take that fight, and we want to see that happen. And that's why when the Consumer Product Safety Commission gave us inadvertently data that actually revealed that our suspicion about that product was true and that 100 babies had died, and we knew exactly why, they gave it to us and inadvertently and then wanted it back and said that we shouldn't do the story because there's an arcane law on the books that says you have to ask permission from the manufacturers before you release that data. And so they had lawyers threatening us. The Consumer Product Safety Commission threatening Consumer Reports. I said, no, I'm going to go public tomorrow. Done. In 48 hours. Thank you. In 48 hours, there was a complete recall of all of those products. It's off the market. All the look-alike wannabes are off the market. And this was Fisher-Price, by the way. So I was going up against a very big company and a company that's near and dear to everyone. And the fight's not over because there's a secondary market, right? And that's what we're after now. But so I think that's the difference, is that we'll fight when we've got the data. And as soon as I saw that data, I was like, oh, we're going to have this fight. And we're going to have it publicly. And then there are some apps that I was talking about, the banking apps, where we discovered, we knocked on their door and said, look, we've got this data. Do you want to fix this? Some of them did. So I'm not going to ding them publicly. I sat down, I was like, you want to fix this app, make it more private? Good. Same with Elon Musk. I mean, he doesn't like us anymore. He doesn't talk to us much anymore. But there was a time where we did discover that one of the braking mechanisms of one of their cars was not functioning properly. He actually got on the phone and talked to my engineers for 40 minutes, and they did an over-the-air fix, which is an amazing thing when you have connected products, and they fixed the Tesla, and they fixed the car that was fine, done. Now, of course, publicly, he trashed us. And so we didn't know what we were talking about and all that stuff. I'm like, fine, you know, there's theater and then there's saving lives. And I think I'll choose the latter. But yeah, so there's that. I think you have to know what your moral ground is. And that is, for us, it's about the facts, it's about science, it's about what's informing our decisions, what's informing the positions that we're taking. And not everyone's going to agree.
Search for a new leader for Yale and ask whether there is a step where operating assumptions are stated and people come to an agreement about assumptions you're making with foresight. 10 years from now, what do we think the world will look like? Are we going to revert to paper after 5 years? So in 10 years, we're all going back to the Gutenberg press. Or are we living in this AI world for now until forever? So are those operating assumptions being stated within the search committee and there's agreement?
I think we're all living in that world no matter what you're doing. I mean, all of us are making assumptions about the fact that, and I see it when I hire somebody who's 20 years old versus what I'm doing and the tools that I'm using. Like, that hasn't shaken out yet. Yes, AI is not going anywhere. Yes, it's going to get more powerful very shortly. Yes, we know we have natural resource issues. Yes, we know about climate change. So there are so many things we can't predict, the pandemic included. That's not gone away. There are other things on the horizon. I think what that does, though, is it compels us to think about what we have to think about, what leadership is about, right? Is it about knowing, or is it about learning and foresight? You know, I think for me, working in an organization of experts and engineers, it's really hard to convince them life is about learning, not just about knowing. And I think that's the place we want to be. Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
Marta, that was wonderful, inspiring, and informative. And as a token of our appreciation, we'd like to present to you this.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful.